Hello everyone, welcome back to the FPL Vincenzo channel. Since I last podded, we've had the Premier League fixtures announced for the next season. I've taken a day or two to run some analysis of those and get my thoughts together on what I think of the fixtures, and feels like now's a good time to pod about it. So, as with most new seasons in FPL, the two decisions I like to make early and take a stance on early is when I'm going to wildcard, because I think that impacts how aggressive you be, how short-term you look at the start. And then the most valuable players in the game, take a stance on what you think of them. I didn't have Erling Haaland last year, and some thoughts around Mo Salah, I think, will be the critical player going into Gameweek 1 this year. So I'm planning 2 pods in the next week, looking at Mo Salah and ways we can approach this and angles we can take, and trying to help myself by sort of thinking out loud with you guys here to try and work out my best strategy on how I want to handle Mo Salah through the first batch of games for the season. So we have some options, and this one I'm calling the proactive proposal. So I think there's lots of ways you can handle Salah. You can just start with him and keep him. You can not start with him. This one, spoiler alert, in the first minute or so of this pod, is looking at maybe starting with him and then even considering moving him on. I know some people don't like making early transfers, don't like booking in early transfers, but it may be the best strategy. Sort of focus on the word maybe there. So let's begin by looking at sort of Liverpool in particular and Mo Salah, what we've got in the early fixtures. So standing out straight away is Gameweek 1 at home to Bournemouth, which is a really nice fixture for him. This is a Bournemouth team right now who are going to be heavily changed defensively based on last year. So Kepa, as far as we know right now, isn't rejoining in goal. Daniel Huijsen's obviously at Real Madrid. Zabarnyi, not sure if it's been completed yet, but looks like he's heading off to PSG. Milos Kerkez, the same, looks like he's heading off to Liverpool. So of their defensive unit of 5 last year, really, it's only the right back, whoever that proves to be, Adam Smith, James Hill, whoever that's going to be, that is likely to still be part of the squad next year. So that's not ideal, obviously, for Bournemouth to have a completely changed defence. So that's not going to have time to settle, to bed in, to understand each other. There is a bit of pre-season, obviously, but that feels like a good opportunity for Liverpool to take advantage of that experience that Bournemouth are learning. And I've got the fixtures underneath for Gameweek 1. And I think looking at those, he probably is going to be the most popular captain. He's probably going to be well owned, shall we say. And I imagine his EO will be somewhere between 100 and 150%. So having Salah covered, should we say, in Gameweek 1 is probably a sensible idea. But if you don't have him, and let's say he gets a hat-trick, maybe he gets a 20-pointer or something like that, and you don't have him, and even worse, you have a captain against him that does nothing, you're fighting a losing battle, because people are going to have 40 points from Mo Salah. You may have a 2-point alternative captain that doubles to 4, and you're 36 points down already. So there is an element of protecting yourself, I think, early on. Don't do anything stupid, staying within the pack. Obviously, you can take your risks in other ways, maybe 1 or 2 differentials with your team, but you have to do it with the most expensive player in the game, the highest owned player in the game, the most popular captain in the opening game week who has a good home game. Feels like it's a bit of a risk. So I like the fact of owning Salah in Gameweek 1. I say that there's not a clear standout alternative captain. You have Jared Bowen playing against Sunderland, who we expect to be this year's Southampton. You have Ollie Watkins, who generally scores goals in home games against Newcastle. That could be appealing. Tottenham at home to Burnley could be appealing under new manager Thomas Frank. Maybe they'll get Dom Solanke to provide output in the level that Frank got out of Ivan Toney or something like that. So there'll be options for Gameweek 1 for those that want to be different. But is it a risk worth taking when Salah's playing against a depleted defence with an ownership sort of an EO over 100%? Probably not is the valid answer. Even for me, who likes to be a bit different, that feels like it's pushing it. So there is a logical reason based on all of that to start with Salah in Gameweek 1. The issue becomes Gameweek 2 and Gameweek 3, because Gameweek 2 is away to Newcastle. This will be Newcastle's first home game of the season, so St James's Park can be a bit of a cauldron at the best of times. Fan base will be really up for it. Newcastle with their intense pressing, high work rate, you'd imagine that'll be to the max on the first home game of the season where they want to get off to a good start in front of their own supporters. Arguably, I'd say this is subjective, but arguably this is the hardest away game for most teams over a season playing at St James's Park because of particularly the way Newcastle play with their physicality, their pressure, their intensity. Really hard game. Even worse on the fact that in this example, it's Newcastle's first home game. So that's pretty much as red as a red fixture can be in my eyes on fixture tickers, away to Newcastle in game week 2. And then game week 3, Liverpool are at home to Arsenal, who I think statistically last year were the best defensive team in the league. I certainly think they're the most organised defensive team in the league. Lots of big physical players, really happy defending in all phases of play, deep blocks, mid blocks, get pressure on the ball as well. So in terms of goal scoring output, those two fixtures look basically as hard as they can get. I'd be amazed over a whole season if Liverpool attackers, and particularly Mo Salah, had back-to-back games where his ceiling was so low. Obviously doesn't mean he can't return. Liverpool may score 2-3 goals across those 2 weeks. Could happen. But obviously projecting on paper in advance, I think this is probably going to be the hardest 2-game sequence Liverpool may have from an attacking standpoint. So do we really want Salah for those games? I think that's questionable. In an ideal world, you wouldn't have him for those games. But I can see why you'd want to roll your transfers early on. Make game week 1's basically a wild card, isn't it? You can set yourself up for 3 weeks, not make any transfers, and then you're then building up a nice transfer kitty that you can make 3 or 4 at once. But if we're being proactive and we're being aggressive here, I think making transfers early on is a strategy. And I think it's one I quite like. You know that there's going to be, 10, 11 million players in the game. Everyone's invested in game week 1. That means everyone's making transfers in game week 1. There's chances to jump on bandwagons, get off failing bandwagons. We know last year from the likes of Nkunku and Quansah that prices can change quickly. People can drop in price early. It's a very active transfer market in FPL terms. Do you just want to sit back and miss out on all of that? I would say no. I think there's opportunities here, particularly with these Salah fixtures, to be a little bit proactive. So let's look ahead. And the example here isn't completely the same, but just to highlight here that it can pay to make transfers in game week 2. So I'm going to jump back here to the 2022-23 season, which for those that don't remember is Erling Haaland's debut season at Manchester City. And heading into game week 1 in that season, I didn't own Erling Haaland. So this is my sort of case study element to this. I had reservations about Haaland in game week 1. Manchester City were playing away to West Ham. Haaland was a new signing at the time. Pep Guardiola at that point, whenever he made new signings, didn't always start with a new player immediately. Sometimes phased them in, gave them a few games off the bench. Maybe it was sort of midway through the season they really started to find their stride. So to me, it wasn't guaranteed for certain that Haaland would start game week 1. Also, in terms of his profile, who was very different to what Man City had previously with the likes of Aguero and Jesus. So were the Man City team and squad around Haaland already drilled to play to his strengths? Because playing to his strengths is going to be different to playing to Aguero's strengths. That might have taken a few weeks to really acclimatise and things like that. And to say it was an away game against West Ham, I think had qualified for the Conference League the season before. So West Ham were no mugs and were capable at home at that time. So I went into game week 1 of that season with Haaland at 11.5 million, thinking that's a good price. He could deliver lots at that price, but I'm a bit sceptical in game week 1. I want a bit of information first before I go piling in. Also in game week 1, Harry Kane, who was also 11.5 million, had a plum home game against Southampton. I think they'd only just stayed up the season before, beat the drop by about 3 or 4 points. Tottenham, unlike Man City, were playing at home. So they had an easier opponent. They had a home game. And we had a striker here who we knew where we stood. We knew what Kane's output capabilities were, etc., etc. So I went into game week 1 with a fairly fluid plan. I was going to start with Harry Kane. I captained Salah, I think, like everyone else in that week. But I wanted to start with Harry Kane. And I had an opportunity to move to Haaland and make a transfer in game week 2. As much as that wasn't considered to be optimal at the time, it was quite nice to plan to roll through game week 1 into 2 transfers in game week 3. I went in with, say, a fluid mindset that it was possible. We obviously know what happened. Kane played on the Saturday. Tottenham won 4-1, but he got nothing. I think Kulusevski was the star of the show from memory in that game. So, yeah, Kane got 2 points, did nothing. Then on the Sunday, the following day in the afternoon kickoff, Haaland scored 2 goals. Man City were quite comfortable against West Ham. Haaland got 13 points. And all of a sudden, by Sunday night, so I don't think game week 1 had even finished. And by Sunday night, it was very likely Kane was dropping in price. Haaland was going to go up in price. People had seen enough already in 6 hours to know that, yeah, Haaland, I have to get him at this price. So definitely sort of against the run-of-the-mill sort of transfer, I ended up on the Sunday night in game week 1, moving Kane to Haaland to not be priced out of it, and I had to sweat for 5 or 6 days of the rest of my squad that I didn't need to do anything else, and it was fine. But the point being here, and the case study element to this, is that sometimes it does, particularly with premium players, booking in transfers and being open to making transfers isn't necessarily the worst thing if it makes sense. And in 22-23, it did make sense. So now we jump back to this season and we look at, are there opportunities here to book in or be fluid, and look at opportunities here that if we want to sell Salah in game week 2, and we do it. And you'll see here, say Liverpool have got 2 hard games, Newcastle away, Arsenal at home. In game week 2, looking at the fixtures, probably the best captain is Bukayo Saka, I would say. Arsenal at home to Leeds. Obviously, maybe some bias here and an agenda around promoted teams, but for the last 2 seasons, the 3 promoted teams have gone straight back down. So I think a lot of people would have loosely in their mind that Leeds, Burnley, Sunderland could go back down again. Therefore, a home game against Leeds is a really strong fixture. We don't necessarily desperately want Saka in game week 1 away to Man United. So we'll play Salah and have him captain against Bournemouth, and then we can move to Saka in game week 2 and captain him against Leeds. Quite a good way to guarantee yourself the best 2 captains in the first 2 weeks without having to own both from game week 1, tying up a large percentage of your budget. Let's say Salah's 15 million, Saka's 11, 12, something like that. Do you really want both of those players for 26 million for the first 2 game weeks when they've got 1 green fixture each and 1 red fixture each? I would argue not. So making a transfer allows that. What it also allows, and let's just use those hypothetical projected prices again, that Salah's 15 million and Saka's 12. You've now got yourself 3 million in the bank. And then in game week 3, you look at it and think, who's the best captain? Again, lots of options. I'm not saying this is outright the best, but one potential captain is Alexander Isak, who happens to also be playing Leeds the same way Saka was, although it's at Ellen Road. Now, you don't really want Isak for the first 2 weeks. He starts off away to Aston Villa and he starts off then home to Liverpool. But game week 3, a promising run of fixtures starts for Isak. So let's say Isak's also 11 million for the start of the season. You've now got 3 million in the bank. So could you start with a striker who's 8 million, whoever that's going to be? Let's say that is Dom Solanke. Could be Chris Wood, something like that for the first 2 weeks. And all of a sudden here, you've gone from Salah in game week 1, best captain, transfer to Saka in game week 2, best captain, money freed up in the bank, and in game week 3, you've got a position to get Isak in because you've got 3 million in the bank, best captain. Some people that don't want to make a transfer will look at these weeks and think, right, I need Salah for 1, Saka for 2, Isak for 3. They're my 3 captains. Therefore, they'll go into my game week 1 team. Again, at those prices of Salah 15, Saka 12, Isak 11, you've then spent 39 million on those 3 players, where, again, optimally, the fixtures aren't great. That's a lot of budget tied up in 3 players when in most of the weeks you don't actually really want them. Fair enough, they are talisman players that could do well. You could argue they're fixture proof if such a word exists. But I don't think it's optimal to spend 39 million of your budget on those 3 players if you want the best captain in each week. This strategy, by making 1 transfer a week, allows you probably a better team on a weekly basis because you're not tying up 39 million. And I say you're still getting the captaincy each week you want. It doesn't have to be these 3 players. I say Man United have got good fixtures, or reasonable fixtures in 2 and 3. Let's say Brian Mbeumo does go to Man United, looks really involved, really high output type player in game week 1. Maybe you could move Salah to him in game week 2 away to Fulham, and then you've got him in place for Burnley at home in game week 3, which is clearly a better fixture than Salah against Arsenal. If you decide you're not sure about Cole Palmer in game week 1, I think there's also some possibility that Chelsea's game in game week 1 may not go ahead, depending on what happens in the Club World Cup. You might want to move Salah to Palmer in game week 2 and have him against West Ham away and then Fulham at home in game week 3. Equally, there's Man City who've got a nice home game with Tottenham in game week 2. Let's just say Marmoush is classified as a midfielder, looks really good. You could just go Salah to Marmoush in game week 2 and have him in place for Tottenham at home and potentially even captain him. So, yeah, the key points here that by being proactive with the transfers, you're not tying up all that budget to get the best 3 captains. And if you are going to use transfers in a week, I would rather use the transfer on getting a captaincy right and getting a captaincy in that I want. I don't really want to be using a transfer to correct a wrong choice of a 6 million mid, i.e. last year, people that started with Nkunku may have been forced into a move in game week 2 to get him out because his price was going down and there was someone else they wanted, or Jarrell Quansah or someone that people had to try to deal with in game week 2. Saw people last year, I think, doing Quansah to Robinson in game week 2. And you think, do I really want to do that? Is that a good use of a transfer? I think Salah to Saka to then allow Isak as well is a better use. So there are opportunities, I think, this year to jump around in the first couple of game weeks. Probably, especially for those that are open to playing a wild card in game week 4. And I'll talk about this in more detail in a future pod. I'll do a couple of different wild card type episodes. But game week 4 looks like one of the stronger weeks. Liverpool fixtures get better. Arsenal's fixtures get better. Newcastle's fixtures get better. Crystal Palace's fixtures get better. I think those 4 teams are all going to be part of our plans moving forward, sort of mid-term in FPL. So game week 4 allows you to load up on those 4 teams for a longer run. I quite like the appeal of that. So if you are prepared to go into game week 4, again, loosely with a wildcard plan, I don't hate the idea of making transfers in game week 2, game week 3, setting the wildcard up in game week 4 nicely, and then rolling your transfers at that point for a couple of weeks to build up that transfer bank. So, yeah, that's loosely on my mind as a possibility. The questions become then, so I've got a slide up now about what ifs. So, again, you need to understand what you're like as a manager, what your tendencies are as a manager, and whether you'll follow through with sort of predetermined decisions. So let's, for argument's sake, saying game week 1, Salah does well against Bournemouth. Let's say he does get that 20-pointer that I mentioned earlier. You could look at it now, he's in form. It'd only be 1 game week of data, but he's in form. Are you a manager that typically favours form over fixtures? Because the fixtures would still be what they are, Newcastle away, Arsenal at home. But if you're a form manager, you'll think, doesn't matter what the fixtures are like, I'm still going to pick him. Where me, I tend to be more a fixtures manager over form. So I don't think I'll be swayed by a Salah 20-pointer. I'll still look at it and think, I don't like these fixtures. Therefore, I'm going to move him to someone with better fixtures, even if they're not in the same so-called form, as much as you can take form after 1 game week of data. But if you are a form manager, ask yourself that if Salah hauls in game week 1, will you sell him? And that sort of phases in here to point 2. Do you have the necessary minerals as a manager to stick to the plan? If your plan was to sell him, if you see him get 20 points, will you look at it and think, I can't sell him like that? He's just got 20 points. I can't make that transfer. Because this sort of proactive proposal I'm putting together here, I think does require more a commitment to the plan. I know all plans change, all plans need to be fluid. But if you're going in with let's say, for example, you're going in with this plan to do Salah to Saka and you're not brave enough to go through with it in game week 2, do you have an alternative captain in game week 2 that you're happy to captain? Or do you have a plan B transfer? Like, okay, if I don't do Salah to Saka, I'll be happy to move, I don't know, Dom Solanke, who I've started with in game week 1 against Burnley. I'll move him to a different striker in game week 2. And I'll captain that player instead. I'd be pretty confident right now, even if Salah got 20 points in game week 1, he's probably not going to be an optimal captain in game week 2 away to Newcastle. So just something to bear in mind there, that have a plan B in place, that you'll need someone else to captain instead in game week 2 if you're not going to do the Salah out plan to Saka. And I say, are you brave enough to stick to the plan if Salah's just hauled? Now I'm going to jump over to the other side of the slide here, talking about if Salah does badly in game week 1. What's the consequences there? Well, we already know his fixtures are going to turn to 2 hard games. A lot of managers, I think, again, are active early on, I think many will be quite impatient. And they'll think, I was expecting Salah to get a haul against Bournemouth. I captained him. He didn't get me very many points. I'll sell him. It'll be those that haven't planned to, like maybe we have, based on what we're discussing here. But those that sort of make a spontaneous choice to sell him, could there be a price drop for Salah early on? If he starts off at 60% ownership even higher, which I don't think is unreasonable to anticipate that. If quite a lot of managers get rid because they see the fixtures, see the blank in game week 1, his price could drop. It won't be the same as the Kane Haaland situation that I sort of spoke about on the last slide, because there's going to be no one at Salah's price point. So you'll be able to afford, obviously, any downgrade. But losing that 0.1 could have an impact on something else. So bear that in mind, that will you be prepared to stay with Salah even if his price drops? Also, just having the back of your mind, spoke about plan Bs just now. Let's say Haaland goes off in game week 1. We don't know the prices yet, but Haaland is probably likely to be the nearest player to Salah in price, albeit likely in a different position, unless they change Salah to a striker. Unlikely, but you never know. Have it in the back of your mind that rather than move Salah to Saka, would you be prepared to take a -4? Because it might make sense to downgrade Salah to someone a lot cheaper to upgrade a striker to Haaland. I'll use the Solanke example again. You have Solanke against Burnley in game week 1. Haaland goes off. You think, right, I really want to get Solanke to Haaland here. The difference is 7 million in price or whatever. Be open to the idea of moving Salah all the way down to someone who's a lot cheaper, sort of around the 8 million price point. I'm thinking we're talking here, and do that. So have it in the mind that you might need to take a -4 and be fluid in your plan there. That could end up still being a good move, even though an early hit isn't sort of part of anyone's initial plan. Other thing just to bear in mind, if Salah does badly in game week 1 and you're going to keep him, I think he will be the most expensive asset in the game this year. And if he does badly, are you going to have the confidence to captain him again, either in game week 2 or in game week 3? My gut feeling would be you probably shouldn't do. In which case, you've got the most expensive player in the game that you're going to have for 2 weeks and not captain him. Not necessarily a problem with that again, but it's probably getting not the optimal use of funds to be tying up that much money on one player who's not captaining. I think you want to be captaining someone sort of 75% of the time if you're spending this sort of money on them. So, yeah, some thoughts there around just getting you in the mindset of thinking sort of plan A's, plan B's, different scenarios on how you would approach things. And I think this is quite important to get all this clear before you go into game week 1. Long time away. I understand that. But I do think Salah probably is the most important player to know where you stand with and know what your plans are around, because the decision you make with him impacts obviously all your other decisions. So just a little takeaway here from all the things I've spoken about today. By being proactive and moving Salah, say the plan I've suggested, it doesn't have to be these 3 players. It may not be these 3 players by the time the season kicks off, but by moving Salah down to Saka to then improve a striker to Isak in game week 3, it's probably the best route to achieve the top 3 captains in the opening 3 weeks. You'll have the best captain each week or the highest owned captain each week. You're then mitigating too much early risk, because obviously captain swings can be a bit brutal. If you're on the popular captain, you're going to be staying within the pack in terms of points. Still obviously a chance to gain rank, because I say you can have a couple of differentials in your squad that could steal you 2 or 3 points more than others. And because everyone obviously starts on 0 points in FPL, if you can get 4 or 5 point gain on the template, that could still be quite substantial in terms of rank, and you've not taken too much risk in doing that. So I'm not a big fan, if you do make a decision that Salah, Saka, Isak is the best 3 captains for the first 3 weeks, having that treble up in game week 1 and booking that in game week 1 because you don't want to make a transfer, you're tying up lots of budget there. And in the case of Salah, he's going to have 2 red fixtures. In the case of Saka, you could argue it's 2 red fixtures. In the case of Isak, he maybe even has 2 red fixtures. So you get a lot of sort of fixture ticker red fixtures just to get the best captains. That's a suboptimal way to play in my eyes. So I wouldn't want to tie up that much budget on 3 players when most of the fixtures for them aren't very good. So again, using the weekly transfer plan, the proactive plan, you can still get the 3 captains. And just quickly highlight, I think it does kind of, if you are going to sell Salah, it kind of does probably lock in wildcard game week 4, because that fixture against Burnley in game week 4 is really appealing. I think it's quite hard to go into that game without him. Obviously impacted by how Burnley started. If Burnley they had incredible defensive numbers in the Championship last year. If it looks like in the first 3 weeks they're showing signs of maintaining similar levels, then maybe the appeal of Salah in game week 4 is a bit less. But I think based on what we know right now, Salah's going to be an incredibly high own in game week 4, very popular captain in game week 4. We'll probably want him. if we start selling him and shifting the budget around and things, then getting him back in game week 4 is nigh on impossible without a wild card. So have that in mind as well, that when your wild card probably factors into this plan as well. So there's the takeaways. There's some that was my first thoughts on Salah for this year, to try and be proactive and use him as part of a transfer plan. I'll have a pod out in the next few days looking at plan B, because there is last year I didn't own a Haaland in game week 1, and I thought spending 15 million in the case of Haaland was too much, and I could spread the money better elsewhere. There's obviously the opportunity to make a similar plan again around Salah for this year, whether he's 15 million, 14 million, whatever it's going to be. There's still going to be a case that he's too expensive, particularly looking at those first 3 weeks. If he's too expensive, do we really need him? How are we going to spread that budget around alternatives? It's also on my mind at the moment that not having Salah in game week 1 is still a very viable strategy as well. And I'll just captain someone else. Hopefully we get a bit of insight on someone like, I don't know, how strong Bowen against Sunderland's going to be, and maybe he is a viable captain. So we can view this one as a little bit of a two-parter in terms of whether we start with Mo Salah in game week 1. This is the proactive approach. The second one's more bolder. I think I called it a bold blueprint or something like that. I'm going to call it, to look at not owning Salah at all, and sort of talking through my thoughts and having a little bit of a brain dump about that. So that will be out, sort of a second part to this, in the next few days. So thanks everyone for listening. If you like this pod, please subscribe to the channel if you've not already. And hopefully over the next couple of weeks, we'll have lots more thought around the game. And that can be now, before the prices have been revealed, and afterwards, looking at sort of what I'm thinking about on a sort of day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But until the next pod, thanks guys, and speak to you all soon.